I'd like to welcome you to the Monroeville Planning Commission meeting, August 17th, 2022. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a brief moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, please be seated. Sharon, if we could have roll call, please.
Mr. Pacusa,
Here.
Ms. Krivda,
Here.
Mr. Walker,
Here.
Ms. Montgomery, Ms. Lawrence, Mr. Masson, Mr. Bertoni,
Here.
Mr. Weldon.
Here.
Thank you. First item for us will be approval of minutes from the July 20th meeting. Everybody had a chance to review those when they were sent to us?
Yes.
I've moved to approve it.
Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Approve.
Second
Motion.
by
Second.
Bruce. Okay. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Under new business, Paul, could you please read us item 1?
Sure. This item has been revised, so I'm going to read it as it was advertised, and then I'll explain the changes.
Okay.
22-3-SUB Keene Estate Subdivision Plan. Applicant is requesting preliminary and final subdivision approval to subdivide and consolidate tax parcels 857P184, 857P186, and 857P214. Existing lots 6A2 and 6B2 are to be consolidated into Lot 2, and the dividing line between newly created Lot 2 and existing Lot 7 is to be adjusted approximately 16 feet in a westward direction, creating Lot 1. The property is located at 931 Macbeth Drive in the R4 Multifamily Residential Zoning District. Since the time of this being advertised, it's been reduced to a 2-lot subdivision. Lot 857P214 has been removed, and the section in there about adjusting the lot line 16 feet has also been removed. And the surveyor is here approaching, and he can explain it in more detail.
Great. If you could please state your name for the record, and if you haven't signed in, if you could sign in.
I'm signed in.
Thank you.
Terry Seifers, Gen 3 Surveying.
Thank you.
Paul pretty well explained exactly what's going on. Circumstances have changed the subdivision, so basically all this is a 2-lot consolidation right now. And there were no issues with it that I'm aware of. All revisions have been made that I've seen. I'm still awaiting county and engineering comments.
Do you have a plan?
Yes,
it's
I
all
do.
done.
Just, could you just get that on the screen just in case somebody's watching? Just center it in the middle, and the TV guys will put that up on the monitor.
Hopefully. There we go.
There we are.
So if you just show the 2 lots.
Kinda
where the
orient
third
us,
lot
yeah.
These are
was.
the 2 lots. This is the subdivision line to be removed across here.
Just point out that 3rd lot that's no longer part of it.
This is the 3rd lot that was over here. This was the estate of the Keene family, and this lot has been sold as its original deed. There were no changes made to it.
Any questions? Anyone?
No.
Seems pretty relative. Yeah, cut and dry. So,
Yes.
all right. Any comments from any audience members? Didn't think so. So, not hearing any, I'll entertain a motion.
You have to verbalize your motion.
I'll move to approve.
Move to approve. Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Bruce, second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Our next item is a work session for the zoning ordinance. We have a presentation by Strategic Solutions. So if you guys would like to come on up, state your name, and tell us what you have. Show us if you have your video all
I
set
think
up
we're good
and
to
ready
go.
to go.
Are we good with the computer?
So give them a second, just watch the monitors, and once it comes up on the monitors, it's all you.
Hi, I'm John Trant with Strategic Solutions. Also with me tonight is Matt Pernelli, and we're here to talk with you about your zoning ordinance. You have 3 documents that I placed at your seats. at the dais. There is an agenda. Let me grab mine real quick. You've got an agenda for tonight's discussion. There's a draft of the zoning ordinance audit that's an Excel spreadsheet, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint presentation that we'll be using tonight. Tonight's session is to introduce the process and the project to you, talk about some key zoning hot topics, and then solicit feedback from the Planning Commission in terms of key issues and concerns that you've experienced when working with the zoning ordinance over the last several years. This project started several years ago. I'm sure Paul has filled you in along the way in terms of the drafting of the ordinance. We've had an opportunity to review the draft, and I understand from Paul that you all have recently or have already received a current copy of the draft document. Our job is to work with Paul and staff and yourselves to get this document across the finish line. And we'll talk a little bit about what that process looks like at the end of the meeting, with our ultimate goal of adopting the ordinance or preparing an ordinance for adoption in January or February of next year. So we're going to start tonight, unless you have any questions at the outset. Is there anything in particular you want me to address at the outset? Paul, are we good to go?
You're good.
Okay. We're going to start with item 2 on our agenda. Matt's going to talk through some key zoning issues for you. I thought it'd be good to sort of get our head in the game with respect to zoning and zoning hot topics before we dive into a multi-hundred-page document. So Matt's going to go over some of those key issues with you and hot topics to kind of get those juices flowing.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Like John said, my name's Matt. I work for Strategic Solutions, and we're just going to go over some zoning hot topics that we have discussed in the past and what Paul and staff have discussed with us. So an overview of the topics we're going to go over, we have planned residential design standards, commercial design standards, crematorium and funeral home uses, tiny home uses, short-term rentals, drive-throughs, parking requirements and diagrams, and application process diagrams. All right, so starting out here with planned residential and commercial design standards. So these dictate how a certain place will feel, the things that make a place a place. Common practices that we like to consider are architectural standards, so that's building materials, building setbacks, building height, density, yard and bulk regulations, stuff like that. We also like to consider streetscapes and promote consistency with our streetscapes. So consider street width standards, curb design, and street trees. All those are very important. And then open space. We want to make sure that it's usable first and foremost. It's not just set off in the corner on a hill. We want to make sure that everyone has equal access to this open space. It's just a good practice to go by. So crematoriums. I'm aware of issue with a crematorium in Monroeville here. It's not the same as a funeral home. Usually it's considered as an accessory use of a funeral home. Residents are usually okay with funeral homes in their neighborhoods, but crematoriums are a bit of a different story there. Sure. So what we consider here is lot size requirements again, the distance from other uses, screening and landscape buffers, obviously important. Emission standards and control, proper licensing and permitting requirements, and reasonable hours of operation.
I'm just gonna interrupt real quick. We have that one funeral home that's on the council's agenda right now. Right. And they're potentially proposing a crematorium. Because their application is already in process, any new regulations in the new zoning ordinance will not affect them. They will essentially be grandfathered in under the old ordinance.
So tiny homes, this is becoming more and more prevalent. You guys might see in the news. I guess a good place to start is just the definition of what exactly a tiny home is. Most ordinances that I have read have defined it as a house that's between 150 square feet and 400 square feet, and it needs to be constructed on a foundation. Tiny homes are becoming a viable housing option for many people, and it's important not to restrict a form of affordable housing. So what to consider, just regulate it like any other single-family housing option. So again, minimum and maximum square footage, require service to public utilities. I suggest requiring homes be mounted on foundations. This is just a safety issue. Use the same setback requirements as used by the rest of the district, and direct applicants to the federal guidelines on HUD, NOAA, and RVIA, which is the Residential or Recreational Vehicle Association.
And there could be some other challenges with this. I'll talk to our building inspector about this because the rules and regulations set forth by the International Building Code, they have separate regulations for room sizes and things of that nature. So I will work with him to see how these could possibly work into the zoning ordinance.
Okay, moving on here. Short-term rentals. The biggest takeaway that I want to get across is it's not just Airbnb. Airbnb is the most popular short-term rental website right now, but it's important to recognize that it is a company or a platform, not a product or use. Ordinances should specify bed and breakfast and short-term rentals as different uses. Successfully managing short-term rentals comes from both zoning and permitting. So with the zoning, it's which districts do short-term rentals reasonably fit into, and then parking requirements, maximum length of stay, stuff like that. With permitting, develop annual permits for short-term rentals, including conditions for proof of residency, and this just helps negate the people buying up houses just to use them as short-term rentals. If you force them to also live in the house most of the time, that saves you from a lot of hassle.
Okay.
So how the ordinance in its current draft state is addressing short-term rentals, it's actually pretty good, we think. The biggest thing is making sure that it's short-term rentals and not Airbnb. You guys have a length of stay regulation, parking requirements, property ownership and proof of residency, like I said, a max number of guest regulation, annual permit requirement, and good signage language for the houses.
If I could interrupt for a second, Paul, what is our annual permit requirement for something like that then?
We don't have anything right now.
Okay.
We were looking at it like hotels. There's a life safety inspection once a year for the overall building. We don't inspect every room every time there's a new person that rents a room.
Yeah.
But like a house that's rented in a residential area, there's a occupancy inspection anytime there's a change of occupant. So if one person lives there for a year or 10 years, there's no inspection, but as soon as a new person moves in, there's an inspection.
Okay.
So for short-term rentals, we're not sure how that's gonna work because, we're not gonna inspect the same house,
Yeah,
once a
multiple
month,
times.
forever.
Right.
So we'll have some language in there about, at least an annual inspection for smoke alarms and
Yeah,
things like that.
okay. Thank you.
Drive-throughs were another issue. In our first meeting, Paul introduced us to the Starbucks down there on 22. So I just made sure to point that out again. So how the ordinance could fix this, separate criteria for 3 different uses. So drive-through establishments, that's like banks and pharmacies. Restaurants would be like Starbucks, McDonald's, and then drive-in restaurants should have their own parking requirements. And then the use of diagrams like shown is very helpful in ordinances, just to mitigate any confusion or anything like that.
It's a really nice diagram. Where'd you get that?
I wonder where. Yeah, I don't know.
You just got it off of Google, who are you kidding?
I drew that. I did.
So more on diagrams because we like diagrams.
They're good visuals.
Exactly. So great parking diagrams like the one shown above are already included. We're recommending more diagrams like the one to the right there. Some smart art for various practices such as complicated application processes. If you put them in a nice graphical format, it's a lot easier for people to understand and can even become its own handout like we discussed earlier. So I believe that's all I have for you guys. Any questions for me?
And this is the first meeting of several.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, like John said, the current draft is like 300 pages long.
Okay.
About a third of that is definitions and things you don't really need to be too concerned about. But if you're just driving around and something pops into your head, hey, you know, we need to think about this, just jot it down, get in touch with me during the week. We can talk about it at the next meeting or something. But I don't expect you to read the entire draft. It's very long. But, you know, if there's one topic that you're concerned about, let us know, and we can dig into it.
And that's a good segue, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to ask something in regards to the short term. When it comes to these rentals, can you define a little bit more what short term actually is? Because I'm trying to compare it to an incident that just took place not too long ago in the city of Pittsburgh.
Sure, we'll define that in the ordinance, but typically be less than 30 days.
Okay. Thank you.
So I assume you guys have done ordinances for other local municipalities in the area here?
We
prior?
have, yeah.
Have any of these sort of items already been in place for some of them, like crematoriums, tiny homes, short-term rentals, that you have feedback from those municipalities to see how they're working out for them?
Yes, so what we do is we go through this ordinance, and I'll explain a little more about the audit now. So this audit represents every section in your current draft ordinance. And I keep saying your ordinance, I want to be clear, we're working off of the proposed draft, not your current ordinance that's on the books.
Right.
So with respect to your current proposed zoning ordinance, we use this document, this audit document, which is in draft form, to go through and highlight issues that we think are of concern or could use more detail or could use revision. And then to answer your question, we look at ordinances we've drafted for other places, sample ordinance that will be circulated by associations statewide, municipal associations oftentimes circulate draft ordinances. And then just pulling on our experience working with municipalities throughout Western PA. I serve as zoning officer in several municipalities. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I kind of have seen all of the weird, crazy zoning scenarios that are out there. And you can't draft a perfect ordinance. I'm not here to say that we're here to draft the perfect ordinance. So if you're looking for that, I'm sorry. I'll yield my time. But we're going to do our best to address the key issues in a way that are specific to Monroeville, and we'll give you the best tool that you can have on the books. You're going to have to modify it. I mean, we always encourage that zoning ordinances be living, breathing documents. But once you get this big draft adopted, hopefully it'll be nothing more than little tweaks along the way. Yeah. And I will say globally, the ordinance, we've completed several passes through. We've got the draft of the audit. It's a good draft ordinance. There's nothing in there that we were like, holy smokes, we need to go back to the drawing board on this. So this is really about tweaking, pulling in some best practices from other places that we've seen where it's worked, and working with Paul to get this across the finish line.
Okay.
Are there any specific issues, moving on to item 3 on our agenda, any issues that you've experienced working through applications that come before the Planning Commission where you have found that the language in the ordinance wasn't as clear or as helpful in your current ordinance? I recognize you're not implementing your draft ordinance right now, but it would still be insightful to know what key issues or hot topics you all have front of mind.
And just so you know, we're missing 3 members.
Okay.
2 of the members are fairly new members. These are our 2 veterans. So, the people that have the most experience aren't here.
Okay.
There are some discrepancies, but I'm sure he's been ironing that out, that we've come across that we can't hash out, but hopefully that'll all, balance out once you're done with the whole
And that's what I've been doing in the last couple of years. I'm a big
Right.
fan of Post-it notes.
Yeah.
And anytime I would get a phone call from a resident or something that came up at a council meeting or a planning commission meeting that wasn't addressed in our current ordinance, I would make a note. And then when I started the draft, I took all of those notes and made sure they were addressed. So a lot of the common things that we've been fighting are addressed in the draft. But like I said, if there's something that, pops up, like I came across one here, and I don't know if we don't have to get too deep into this, but with the short-term rentals, another thing that sprung up is a large corporation might buy a house and then they let their employees use it at will when they're in Pittsburgh. So they're not paying for it, they're not renting it, it's just at their leisure. And I don't know if we can do anything about those, not that we have a bunch of them, but I've heard of that happening. You know, IBM or Apple or
Right, yeah.
Google.
Sure.
They'll buy a house, and instead of their employees staying at the Marriott or whatever, they have a house to use on a
Yeah.
weekend, and it's a different person every weekend. So I don't know if we can do anything with that.
Okay, yeah, we'll look at,
Aren't they,
look at that.
aren't they establishing a more defined criteria for Airbnbs? Is that what you're, yeah, I
It's
mean,
along those lines,
it
but
was
it's
kind
not,
of casual before, but now it's becoming very popular, and with situations like that occurred in Pittsburgh, where, you know, people just, they
And-
rent it
and-
out, and do you have to live, like where it says there that they're resident, so you actually have to, it's your resident that you're using as an Airbnb, is that a criteria? I mean, you just can't buy a house and start renting it out as an Airbnb, you know, because,
Right, so all of those things are and will be defined in the draft ordinance. And we'll try and address all of those different scenarios, and that's where, when we get a little further along in this process, we'll try and break it. So, you know, we're taking this input, we're taking our review and Paul's input, and we propose revisions. And then several months from now, we're gonna come back to a meeting with you and say, okay, let's focus in on a couple of these hot topics. Let's all read it together.
Right.
Can we break it? We come up with a scenario that this ordinance doesn't get us what we want.
Right.
So that'll be further along in the process.
okay.
I was gonna say, I know a couple times we've had the issue come up, and I think we addressed some of it as far as like the gas well drilling and fracking situations, and the Commonwealth requiring us to have that permitted in some zone. Like I said, I think we addressed that somewhat in the draft.
there's
the
a
most recent
very
draft.
lengthy section on oil and gas extraction.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't think of anything else.
Is there any current oil and gas drilling?
Not any current drilling, there's several conventional wells, and I don't know that there's any deep wells. There's definitely no deep wells located in Monroeville, but there may be some on the periphery that have horizontal
Right.
wells under Monroeville.
There really aren't, as I understand, there's large vacant tracts that
No.
you would accommodate drilling, right?
Right.
There's a couple, but I don't know of anybody that's shown any interest in it.
Any other hot topics you want to make sure we take a look at?
No, I think, yeah, I mean, most of the ones I thought about, I know you had covered.
Yeah.
Like I said, Paul's been kind of working through this for
Yeah.
a couple of years now, and we've seen the recent draft, so.
And we've met with Paul a couple times now. We're going over his Post-it notes.
Right.
So it's awesome to have Paul and his notes in real time with what the calls he's getting and what you're experiencing in the community, so we can
Yeah.
try and make sure we keep the document updated as it moves forward towards adoption. So, speaking of adoption, if we move to item 4, the adoption schedule, if we're able to pull that up. We have a draft schedule here, and we're working with Paul to align meeting dates for a planning commission coming up, as well as council. Globally, as I said, we're targeting February adoption by council, February 14th, to be exact. Happy Valentine's Day. Where would you rather be than at a council meeting adopting a 300-page zoning ordinance on Valentine's Day? That may change and flex. We're going to have to work with you all and with Paul as we move through this process. We may need an extra meeting with you. We may be able to streamline it through. We built in some flexibility here. We'll be back with you on September 21st. And at that point, we'll have sections of the document that we're going to take the comments from the audit and Paul's notes and our meeting notes from Paul and start underlining and strike through changes in the document so we can dive in. We, by no means, as much as I would love to spend evening after evening with you, and I don't mean that sarcastically because I love doing this, we are not going to be able to go through page by page.
Right.
So we're going to hone in on key sections that we and Paul think are important for us to review with you. We'll review those underlying strike-throughs as we go. But as we dive in, if there's anything in particular above and beyond the couple of topics that you threw out tonight that you want to make sure we address,
Right.
please let Paul know, and we'll be prepared at the meeting to make sure we address them.
Okay.
And just to let you know, at the last council meeting, we changed our schedule for council meetings.
Oh, okay.
The work session used to be the Thursday before the second Tuesday. That is no longer in effect. It
Okay.
is now the first Tuesday and second Tuesday for council meetings.
For the work session?
Work session is the first Tuesday of the month,
Mm-hmm.
and then the second Tuesday is the voting session, which hasn't changed. That's the same.
Okay.
So it went from a Thursday to a Tuesday for the work session.
Okay. Any other questions or
Not at this time.
comments? Okay, I haven't seen myself on camera for a while, so I'm gonna go home and hit the treadmill. Can't do anything about the hair, maybe I could lose a couple of pounds. Okay, thank you so much for your time tonight. Looking forward to working with you. We'll be
Yes,
back
you
in
as well.
September.
Sure.
We'll dive in the document and we'll work with Paul between now and then.
And I'm pretty
Appreciate
confident
your
we'll get
time.
this adopted and
Yes.
somebody will come through with something new we never thought about.
You're
so.
right, it never fails, but
Absolutely.
that's okay, at least you got a really good base.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great,
That's what ZHB is for.
yes.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice
Have a
meeting
great
you all.
evening.
You as well. That concludes our new business. So unless anybody has anything else, I will seek a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion?
Bruce, motion to adjourn, second.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.